people in your neighborhood.
You know, we probably could have shot outside today, but we wanted to show off our new recliners. Some of you may have noticed that we were putting a blanket over the back of the old recliners. That was because they were wearing out pretty badly.
It was kind of disgusting.
Yeah, so we have replaced them. And there's going to be a table in here for probably the next video. But you get what you get, folks. I mean, you know. But to do this week's video, we've done 2 previous neighbors videos. And I think a big reason for that was to show that, yeah, the RV community is great, but it's really not that much different than any other neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so we did our first 2 videos, which the first one talked about kind of a mix between good and bad. The second one was all about people exposing far more than they wanted to.
Or far more than they thought they were.
Exactly. And this third and final neighbors video is going to be probably the most serious. And it's focusing on what you would call bad neighbors.
Or bad situations with neighbors.
Even more appropriate. And the final story is, unfortunately and sadly, about a couple that lost their lives. For those of you new around here, I'm Felix.
I'm Cindy.
And in 2019, we sold pretty much everything and started full-time RVing. First in our 2020 Keystone Bullet.
And now we're in our 2022 Keystone Cougar. And we travel following my nursing contracts. I'm a travel nurse, and we've been back and forth across the country 3 times.
3 times. And this week's video is going to talk about some of the neighbors we've had in RV parks that were not so good. Because we limit ourselves to 3 to 4 hours a day of travel, we tend to stay in a lot of parks.
Yeah.
I mean, when we went, each time we've gone cross country, we've done it in 7 days.
So that's a lot of parks, even most of them are overnight.
Yeah.
But
and so we've been exposed to a lot of the RV community. And no more than in the RV park that we consider to be the worst we've ever stayed at, which is I-24 Campground in Smyrna, Tennessee, where we, late one night, had some neighbors appear that were less than desirable, maybe.
They just lived a different lifestyle, you might say, than we do.
Yeah.
They were they were pulling a trailer, which was one of those small trailers that, like, if you had, let's say, 2 motorcycles, if you had 2 large motorcycles, a trailer that you would be able to drive those up into.
It was a cargo trailer.
And they were pulling that, and they pulled it in, and we were like, okay, that's...
And this was about maybe 9:30 at night?
And they had Sturgis or Bust written on the back.
Yeah, and by written, we mean literally just spray painted.
Yeah.
On the side of the
trailer. Yeah. And then they proceeded to, around 11:30, pull the motorcycles out and see how loud they could rev them up.
Yeah.
It was past quiet time.
Well past quiet time.
And past most people's bedtime in an RV park. But it was startling, to say the least. And as we kind of looked at what the situation was, because we discussed a little bit, wonder where they're staying if the motorcycles are in the trailer. They were staying in the trailer.
They pulled those motorcycles out, revved them quite loudly, and then proceeded to climb into the trailer and go to sleep.
So I guess if you want to go to Sturgis bad enough, you'll do whatever it takes to get there. If you're not familiar, Sturgis is a yearly motorcycle rally type thing.
And they stayed 2 days. I actually mentioned it to the park management that they had done that the night before, It was very fortunate that Cindy didn't have to work that day.
Yeah.
But I went and mentioned it to them, and they were like, "Oh, they're just staying 2 days."
It's still a lot of
Yeah.
noise.
Oh, and at 11:30 at night.
Yeah.
In that same RV park, there was a guy, now arguably a neighbor. He was about maybe 4-5 trailers down from us on the right side. This gentleman, a bit older than us, would regularly step out of his trailer and relieve himself right there in his space.
Which is weird. And he had an RV like that would have a bathroom in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he had a fairly, I mean, it was old, but he had a fairly decent travel trailer. And the park did have bathrooms.
Yeah.
But he decided that he wanted to just pee right there on his space.
I'm glad for one that I did not ever see that myself.
Yes. I did mention that to the management as well. And they said, "Oh, that's Mr. I don't remember what his name was, but Mr. So-and-so. He's been here forever."
Yeah. The management people there were nice as far as management goes, but they weren't really big on rules
No,
and enforcing them.
0.
Another thing to keep in mind about being neighborly in an RV park is we're relatively close together, some places more close than others. In Georgia, at Tifton KOA, where we stayed, very nice park, one of our favorite ones.
We actually listed it as number 1. Uh-huh.
And it was beautiful. It was kind of out in the country, lots of pecan trees, lots of just grass, green grass, and walking trails and 2 ponds, and it was very, very nice for a getaway away from city stuff.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed staying there. We were there 6 months, and in the middle of COVID, and but our neighbor caused some issues, and one of those issues was roaches, like an infestation.
Yeah. Oh, it was a major infestation. I was out there talking to him one day, and they were crawling around his trailer, just like that was their home. And
Apparently it was.
he kind of laughed it off and called them, "Oh yeah, those are the pecan roaches." I was like, "What? No.
I was raised in the South. I've never heard of pecan roaches.
No." And I was raised in the home of the queens and kings of all roaches, New York City. And no. Okay, and these were some big roaches. And this is the same guy that we talked about in our first neighbors video that I ultimately found out had stolen my wrench set. And he eventually was ultimately tossed from that park.
Yeah.
The management told him, "Look, you either got to clean up your act here or out you go." And he chose to go out.
Which was nice.
I will say that those roaches never seemed to quite migrate to us. I guess he had all of the things that they wanted to be accommodated.
Yeah. It was pretty much a roach-friendly place, I think.
Yeah, his place, yeah. But yeah, I mean, think about your neighbors, man. I just...
It's hard to understand why, number one, anybody would want to live like that. Plus, why people don't think about how what they do affects their neighbors.
And this was a kid. I mean, the guy was maybe in his late 20s.
Yeah.
Another thing that is really kind of key to being a good neighbor is maintaining your pets and keeping an eye on them. Despite the fact that Bucky is friendly to pretty much everybody, I don't let him just charge over to other dogs or
Other people.
Yeah. Until I'm sure, one, that he's not going to get hurt, and two, that they're okay with it. I actually had somebody in Tucson that said to me she was scared to death of him because he was barking at her. And she had a thing about small dogs. So I made sure to avoid her. In Rio Rancho, the dog park was okay. It was two separate dog parks, a big one for larger dogs and a small one for smaller dogs. There were a couple of larger dogs that would come into the small park because they were very extremely friendly dogs. And Bucky got along with them great. But the separation of the two parks left a lot to be desired. It was basically chicken wire between the two parks. And then this couple came in with this pretty young, very, very hyperactive dog. And she claimed that the dog was friendly and she was fine. And I knew that the only really large dogs that Bucky doesn't like are the ones that are hyperactive. He's just not up for that. And I'm in the small dog park with him one day, and she comes in with this dog who is running around in that park like at hyper speed. And this dog proceeded to charge under the fence between the two parks with a little bit of digging just before she did it. And this woman did nothing. I basically had to tackle her dog. Fortunately, the dog was indeed friendly. But if it hadn't been, I would have gotten bitten. Bucky might have gotten hurt. And what ultimately happened was to be expected, but apparently not by her. This dog came charging under the fence one day while Bucky was in there with one of his big buddies. And the second that dog came under the fence, his big friend said, no. I got my humans in here. I got my little buddy in here. And she put this dog down on the ground and just stood on it. The dog was yelping, and this woman basically said, she didn't mean any harm. No, she didn't mean any harm. I know that. But you need to control your dog.
Yeah, there's no way to know when you meet a new dog whether it's going to be okay with your dog. And apparently that bigger dog didn't know this dog because it immediately saw it as a threat. The bottom line being there was a separation between the dog parks, and keeping that more active dog on the big side was the answer.
Right. And if you can't control her, leave her on her leash when you're in the dog park. Yeah. Something similar to that got a dog killed in Fort Mill, South Carolina when we were there. And it actually turned what was a very nice and very gentle dog into a very on guard and very aggressive dog. There was an Akita that Bucky had actually gone nose to nose with, and they were fine. Their tails were wagging, they were happy. And then maybe about a week later, somebody in the park had just gotten a pit bull. It was brand new rescue, and this thing got away from them. And it came running over to this woman who was walking her Akita. And what that Akita saw was a dog charging its owner. And it killed the pit bull. Oh. From that point on, we had to keep Bucky and her away from each other. It was just a really bad situation.
Yeah.
People, keep control of your animals.
In Tucson, one of our favorite RV parks.
Number 2.
You meet all kinds of people at an RV park.
Yes.
And there was a lady who we ended up kind of privately referring to her as tinfoil hat lady.
Yeah.
Because anytime you interacted with her, it was a new conspiracy theory.
Yes. This lady was quite generous in her advice, and
Oh yeah, she had a lot of dog advice too, didn't she?
oh, she sure did. And she informed me that the fact that I smoke was keeping me safe from COVID. Nicotine apparently is a cure for COVID. Also, the creosote out in the desert was a miracle drug, and I have no idea. If anybody out there knows, please drop a comment. That apparently creosote is a wonder drug, and it's a cure for cancer and many other things. Oh, she also informed me specifically that the jumping cholla, those spines go into your bloodstream.
The cactus spines.
Right. They break off and they go into your bloodstream
Okay.
and can cause all manner of chaos. That I can tell you is 100% not true. Okay, that I've actually spoken to a botanist that lives in Tucson, and because I was worried. I mean, there were times when Bucky would get a piece of cholla in his paw, or Hazel got a big chunk of cholla on her rump, and I was concerned now. I mean, and it turned out that there was no shade of truth about that at all. Our tinfoil hat lady, who has since moved out of the park, and from what I can gather, her children are tending to her.
Just like a neighborhood, it takes all kinds.
Exactly. Now, the saddest story we have from our adventures in RV. I'm not going to name the park. We're not going to name the park. And I really don't even want to talk about exactly when it happened, because all of our internet super sleuths out there would be able to tell where we were when this happened. So the bottom line is there were a couple in the RV park that we were in, not far from where we were. They actually had a pretty nice fifth wheel. I would walk Bucky, and we'd go by it, and I would admire it pretty much every day. It was a nice looking fifth wheel. And for whatever reason, the husband and wife, who were maybe a little bit older than us, who we didn't see much in the RV park, but saw him on occasion. He unalived her and then took his own life. And God, is that sad.
Yeah.
To the credit of the management of that specific RV park, they did not allow it to affect anybody's life outside of that.
I didn't even know about it until you told me.
Yeah. And I have confirmed all of this. This isn't something that I'm, just coming up with some urban legend or something like that. But they kept it separate from everybody else in the RV park. I think the positioning of their fifth wheel and where their space was helped with that, because they were kind of away from everybody else. But he took her life and then his own. And everything was taken care of, and I didn't know about it until maybe a week later, 2 weeks later, when I walked Bucky past there and the fifth wheel was gone. And I inquired, and I was informed of this. And man, if that's not an indicator of RV neighborhoods are really no different than your average neighborhood.
You never know what's going on in somebody else's house.
Exactly. These are people's houses when they're full timing. Just like when you're in a sticks and bricks neighborhood, that's their houses. And you don't know what's going on in there.
It's also a good reminder to kind of keep an eye out for like patterns of people coming and going. Not Mrs. Kravitz looking through the windows and stuff, but kind of just be aware of, you know, Bob next door gets up and goes early to go walk at the mall. Or
And that is, we actually have a neighbor in Tucson named Bob, who is 83,
I think, yeah.
I think, and I know his regular patterns.
Yeah.
When we're there, I know he's up in the morning. Well, he's always up in the morning, whether we're there or not. But he's up early in the morning. He's going to walk at the mall, which I don't know what he's going to do when they finish tearing that thing down.
But he's very active for his age, and
Very.
so we see him going in and out, taking out his trash, going places, coming back, and so we would notice if all of a sudden we didn't see Bob for a whole day. You know, we would notice that, you know, his truck is there, but we haven't seen him at all, and all of his blinds are closed. You know, that would be a warning sign to us.
And I mean, people around us in Tucson specifically know that Cindy is a nurse. And there's a couple that is kind of catty-cornered to where our space is, that 81 and 83, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a stroke. And shortly after he had his stroke, he was recovering. He cut himself, and they couldn't stop it from bleeding.
He was on blood thinner medicine
Exactly.
because of the stroke. So
That woman immediately came to us and said, "Can Cindy come over and take a look at this?" And of course, she immediately ran over there and took a look at it and helped him out. And take care of your neighbors. That's what we're saying here.
yeah.
Okay? I mean, when we were in Las Cruces, this guy, Wolf, that was his name. That's the only name I've ever known him by. Had a problem with his knee. He came over and Cindy examined his knee for him. He had a bad back, and it wasn't easy for him to get under there and pull his black tape. So I would do it for him. Take care of your neighbors. And this RV community can be all of the wonderful things that people claim it to be. I've made a playlist of all of the neighbors' videos, and you can watch that right here.